Some of you don't really understand why China suddenly jumped into the conversation after President Donald Trump called out Nigeria for the Christian genocide happening in the country. When Trump warned that the killings of Christians and innocent civilians must stop and promised that the US would not stay silent, China immediately responded, warning Washington not to interfere in Nigeria's internal affairs. Now think about that for a moment. China never said a word about the killings. It didn't call on the Nigerian government to protect its people. It didn't condemn the attacks or offer help. Instead, its first reaction was to tell America not to interfere. So the question is, why? Why is China so nervous about US involvement in Nigeria? The answer isn't complicated. It's money, it's power, and it's fear of exposure. For years, China has been quietly digging its roots deep into Nigeria. Not just through trade or construction, but through something much darker: illegal mining and strategic control of resources. On the surface, it looks like partnership. New railways, airports, bridges, loans. But behind those contracts, China is building influence, not friendship. And its biggest interest isn't in Nigeria's people, it's in Nigeria's minerals. In states like Kogi, Zamfara, Niger, and Nasarawa, Chinese companies are heavily involved in mining gold, lithium, and other valuable minerals. Some of these operations are legal, many are not. Reports show that Chinese nationals have been caught running illegal mines, destroying farmlands, bribing local officials, and secretly shipping resources out of the country. Just this year, Nigeria's Minister of Solid Minerals confirmed that illegal mining is directly funding terrorism. And that's not a coincidence, because when armed groups control mining sites, the chaos benefits the buyers. They get cheap, unregulated access. That's the truth China doesn't want exposed. Because much of that mineral trade, especially lithium, which China needs for electric car batteries, ends up in Chinese markets. Let's connect the dots. A stable, accountable Nigeria means transparency. And transparency means every contract, every shipment, every dollar would be traced. That's the last thing China wants. Beijing thrives in silence, in environments where deals are made behind closed doors, where there's little oversight, and where corruption keeps everyone quiet. That's why it prefers to work with governments that don't ask too many questions. The same way Nigeria's political class operates. When the US begins to push for investigations, demand human rights audits, or talk about religious freedom, that threatens China's whole system of control. Because the US doesn't just bring aid, it brings scrutiny. It asks, where's the money going? Who's really benefiting? Why are people still dying? Those are the questions Beijing doesn't want asked, not in Nigeria, not anywhere in Africa. Now let's talk about how China got here. Over the last 2 decades, China has invested billions across Africa through its Belt and Road Initiative. It builds roads, bridges, ports, and power plants, but always on its own terms. The contracts are secret. The loans are tied to repayment conditions that favor China. And when countries can't pay, Beijing takes control of assets. It's happened before, in Zambia, where China gained control over mining companies. In Sri Lanka, where it took over a national port after a loan default. And in Kenya, where debt from the railway project crippled the economy. Nigeria owes China over $5 billion in loans. And that's just the official figure. So when Trump steps in and says, "We're watching," that shakes Beijing's confidence. Because US involvement could force transparency. And once transparency enters the room, corruption runs for the door. But let's get something straight. China's warning to the US had nothing to do with protecting Nigeria's sovereignty. It was about protecting its own interests. If Beijing truly cared about Nigeria's sovereignty, it would respect Nigeria's people, not just its politicians. It would condemn the killings, not ignore them. It would speak for the victims, not for the elites. But that's not how China operates. It believes in control, not compassion. Its strategy is simple. Find weak governments, flood them with loans, extract their resources, and call it partnership. That's why China was quick to defend Nigeria's government, but silent about Nigeria's citizens. Because chaos works in its favor. The more unstable Nigeria becomes, the easier it is to control. China is deeply involved in illegal mining across Nigeria. In Zamfara and Niger states, Chinese businessmen have been arrested for operating unlicensed gold mines. In Nasarawa, locals accuse Chinese firms of paying armed groups for protection. In Kogi, Chinese miners are blamed for environmental damage that has destroyed entire farming communities. But here's the worst part. Many of these illegal sites are protected by local politicians. They collect security fees, turn a blind eye, and in return, part of the minerals are exported quietly to China. That's why you rarely hear the government talk about cracking down on Chinese miners, because too many people are benefiting from it. Now imagine what happens if the US decides to dig deeper. Imagine if Washington starts demanding full transparency in Nigeria's mineral exports. Imagine if satellite data and intelligence reports start tracking where every shipment goes. That's what China is afraid of. Because the truth would show that much of Nigeria's gold and lithium wealth, resources that could build schools, hospitals, and jobs, is being stolen in broad daylight, and the money never touches Nigerian soil. So when China says America must not interfere, it's not defending Nigeria's independence. It's defending its business empire. Let's look at the hypocrisy clearly. When Trump called for action to stop the killings of Christians in Nigeria, Beijing didn't condemn the violence. It didn't urge Nigeria to investigate. It didn't offer to send peacekeepers or humanitarian aid. Nothing. It simply said, the US should respect Nigeria's sovereignty. But sovereignty means nothing when citizens are dying. And silence in the face of mass murder is not respect, it's complicity. The truth is, China doesn't care who lives or dies in Nigeria as long as its business continues. The US may have its own interests, but it's calling for accountability. China, on the other hand, is calling for silence. The US sees Nigeria as a potential partner in stability. China sees Nigeria as a resource zone, a place to dig, build, and dominate. That's why the Chinese government is terrified of US pressure. Because American involvement could trigger a domino effect, Nigerians asking questions, journalists investigating contracts, and leaders being forced to explain where the money went. China cannot afford that kind of transparency, not in Nigeria, not in Africa. But here's the tragedy. While the global powers play this game of influence, ordinary Nigerians are the ones suffering. The killings in the north continue, the economy keeps collapsing, and the same politicians who signed away national assets now pretend to be defending sovereignty. China won't speak up for Nigeria's people because it doesn't need them. It only needs their minerals. And Nigeria's leaders, trapped in debt and corruption, won't speak up against China because they depend on its money. So it's the perfect silence, a silence built on greed, fear, and betrayal. That's why Trump's statement was such a shock. For the first time, someone with global influence said openly, "We see you. We see what's happening." And Beijing panicked. Because when the truth comes to light, the lies lose their power. The world is starting to realize that China's presence in Africa is not friendship, it's control. And in Nigeria, that control is being protected by the same politicians who claim to be defending the nation's image. Let's end on this truth. China isn't afraid of the US because it loves Nigeria. It's afraid because the US could expose what Beijing has been doing quietly for years, exploiting chaos, stealing resources, and buying silence. So the next time China warns America not to interfere, remember this: it's not protecting Nigeria, it's protecting its investment in corruption. And until Nigerians themselves start demanding answers, until they decide that their lives and their land are worth more than foreign contracts, both China and Nigeria's leaders will continue to profit from the same pain they refuse to acknowledge.